Jeff, what was that again?
That sounded familiar to me.
That's because we had it on last week.
Oh, that's right. So we're talking about Tarzan again?
That's right. Tarzan and... Didn't you read the show notes?
I did.
Tarzan and Tradition.
My short-term memory is bad.
Part 2.
Part 2.
That's correct. So we had the Johnny Weissmuller there, Tarzan scream, and a little jungle music.
Man, that guy can belt it out.
Yeah, he can. It's kind of like yodeling, right? Imagine Tarzan swinging through the Alps. That's what you got.
Right. Did we talk about Johnny last time?
We did not.
He was an Olympic swimmer?
He was an Olympic swimmer. The guy could wrestle a crocodile underwater.
Okay.
Speaking broken English.
Perfect. Sounds perfect for Tarzan.
Hang around with a chimpanzee.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah.
So what are we doing tonight? This is the Navseam podcast, is it not?
Yeah. What episode are we on?
And your name is Dr. Jeffrey T. Winkle, and mine is
David C. Noe.
That's correct. You left off my title.
Dr.
That's
David
fine.
C. Noe.
All right.
No,
okay.
you're touchy about that. Yeah.
Episode 118.
Okay.
Tarzan and Tradition, Part 2.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to this.
I am too.
Yep.
The first one turned out to be kind of a hit.
Yeah.
I got some nice feedback from folks.
Yes. I think it probably took a lot of people by surprise.
Right.
I'm sure I'm not the only one who never thought about a connection between the legends of Tarzan and the classical tradition.
Turns out the connections are, they're pretty numerous
they are.
and strong.
Yeah.
So we have no shout out tonight.
Okay.
You like what I put there in the script?
You said shout out 9.
9.
All right.
That's right. No shout outs. But this episode is, as we said last week, a bit of an homage to my former professor, the late Dr. Erling B. Holtsmark, who went by the name Jack.
Okay.
And he wrote this book called Tarzan and Tradition, Classical Myth in Popular Literature, published in 1981 by Greenwood Press. And if you could summarize for us, Dr. Winkle, what did we talk about last week? Just to bring people up to speed, since it's a two-parter.
Well, I mean, I think we only got into chapter 1 of that.
That sounds like us.
That does sound like us, right? So, I mean, we were setting up a number of the kind of the key parallels between kind of the classical mythic tradition,
right,
linguistic tradition, and the text of Tarzan. We were talking about the background of who's our author? Who's the author?
Edgar Rice Burroughs. That's
we were
correct.
talking about his background and where his life kind of maybe overlapped with the classics. His particular educational background. And Holtsmark kind of showed that he was steeped in the classics.
That's right.
From a very young age.
Yes, read quite a bit of Caesar. May have studied some Greek, but for sure knew Latin quite well.
Right. Was a very good Latin student.
Right.
And he in that first chapter starts to show about how a number of these things are kind of coming out in the Tarzan legend.
Absolutely.
Either deliberately or just kind of because it was kind of been part of his DNA, Burroughs' DNA.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the first book, Tarzan of the Apes, published in 1912. And you remember that we read some very pointed criticism from another author, a more famous author, an Englishman, right, who had his own feral child story, Mowgli. And so Rudyard Kipling said something along the lines of Burroughs wanted to see how bad a book he could write and get away with it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, do we know? I forgot if we talked about dates. Did the Jungle Book, does that predate?
Definitely.
Okay, so maybe Kipling was thinking, okay, this guy, he ripped me off. Right. And maybe he's having a bit more success.
Right.
Yeah.
And very popular for sure. Yeah.
Right.
Well, we looked a little bit at, what are the expectations you should put on something called pulp fiction? Is it fair to expect this or that? We mentioned that Tarzan has been canceled, at least, because the way he deals with, this is a point we didn't cover too much in the discussion, just mentioned it, but the way that he deals with many of the hot button issues today, you couldn't have said those things today, which he said back then.
Right.
So
right.
just wouldn't work.
Sure.
Different time period.
Right. We may need a more sensitive, updated portrayal of
Tarzan.
Right.
So we looked at chapter 1, which was language. And if the audience remembers, we looked at 3 key aspects that Holtsmark said are unique to Greek and Latin style. And those were polarity, right? Combination of opposites. Chiasmus, right? An A, B, B, A kind of word order.
Yeah.
And then parallelism.
Right.
The A, B, A, B. And for my money, the interesting part of our conversation last week was really looking at the question you asked, which was, does Burroughs do this deliberately? Is the claim that he's deliberately modeling his style after the classical authors? And I think we came to the conclusion following Jack that no, it's just kind of something he absorbed.
Right. And in the grand scheme of things, in the points that Holtsmark is trying to make, it doesn't really matter. Right. That's not. I think it's an interesting point, but I don't think it's an essential point. Where we don't have some diary entry from Burroughs saying, "Oh yes, I modeled this after this book of the Aeneid or whatever." Right. Yeah.
So tonight we're going to start out with chapter 2, and very naturally we flow from the question of language, which was chapter 1, into chapter 2, the question of technique. Right.
Yes.
So how does language produce a kind of technique, specifically the ring composition, for which the Iliad is famous, and then 2 additional elements of standard composition of plots, and that is syncrasis and anagnoresis, right? Anagnoresis, which is
recognition.
Right. So there's a syncrasis, a comparison, and then a recognition scene.
Excellent. Now, before we get into that, I have a question for you. And this goes back to kind of your own experience of Jack Holtsmark. And I was thinking about my own grad school days, and there was a professor that I had, and he wrote a couple of books on kind of American bluegrass music.
Interesting.
And he was it was very, very kind of tangentially was tying it to kind of the Homeric kind of, wandering poet tradition.
Okay.
But I remember in my department, this might just be kind of the dysfunction of my own department, is that there was grumbling amongst the other profs have been, when is John going to get off this thing and come back to kind of doing something actually real scholarship? And I was wondering, was there any kind of talk, Jack's doing this Tarzan thing? Right. And or was it much more collegial?
Well, not that I picked up on.
Okay.
Not that I picked up on, but there was one individual, I won't mention the person's name, but one individual was really well known for a particular classical specialty. Mm-hmm. And I got the impression only from that individual, I'm sure he or she is long deceased, but I got the impression from that individual that serious scholars, they only dealt with classical authors proper.
I see.
And they didn't dabble. But I don't think that was the general perception or attitude, in part because Jack was one of the older faculty at the time.
Okay, yeah.
So, you're not really as subject to that. Plus, he had certainly earned his keep in the classical world previously.
Right.
He wrote this brilliant paper on Lucretius. I think it was brilliant, in which he said Lucretius basically got correct the mechanism of the olfactory sense, right? So in other words, how do we smell? Right. You can read in the text of De Rerum Natura, right, the whole enchilada, as we called it, an account of how smelling takes place. And, Jack carefully analyzed this passage and compared it to, modern understanding of how it is that we smell flowers and things. And he says Lucretius is 99% or something like that accurate, right?
That is so interesting.
So I think the key to being, what did Jack say, halfway between popularizing and scholarship, which is where this Tarzan tradition is. Yeah. The key to doing that successfully is having already made your name in something more serious.
Gotcha.
Because then nobody can say, you're only doing this because you can't do the kind of thing we do.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. You're slumming it for the clicks and the likes there.
Right. Yeah. There's got to be some kind of analog in music, right?
Yeah.
A famous musician does something that's really simple, like the Christmas album. Maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody does a Christmas album, but if your first album is a Christmas album, you're not really entitled to that in some sense. You got to show that you can appeal on your own before you do what everyone else has done. So
I think another analog would be like the band Yes.
Okay.
So in the early albums they had these 12-minute suites of prog rock and such. And then 1983 they come out with a 90125 and it's Owner of a Lonely Heart, and suddenly it's a 3-minute a tight pop song.
Right.
And a lot of the purists were saying, what happened?
Right.
They sold out.
Right. No. There's nothing wrong with being popular occasionally.
Exactly right. And so but a lot of people would say, I think like the kind of scholar who would sneer at Tarzan tradition. Well, they betrayed their prog rock roots, right?
Yeah. So. Yeah, or the person who deconstructs the donut or something as the dessert, right? It's a deconstructed donut.
Yeah.
We just make an actual donut, and that would be okay.
Right.
But I think Jack quoted quite a bit of the thinking of Burroughs, right? Mm-hmm. The beginning of last week's episode, we read his quotations of all of the authors who aren't able to read literature in a sensitive fashion.
Yeah.
Right. And so, he kind of took them apart. He was a contrarian, right? Mm-hmm. And frankly, if people did in the department, which I don't think was the case, if they were to criticize him for doing this, he doesn't care.
Right.
He doesn't care at all.
Yeah.
He does what he's interested in.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I was so drawn to him.
Yeah, that's very admirable.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And he was warm to students, so I appreciated that.
Excellent. Okay.
So technique.
Let's get into it. All right, Dave, you mentioned ring composition.
Right.
Something that Homer is so famous for in the Iliad. How do we see that here in the Tarzan novels?
Right. So beginning here on page 37.
Okay.
Greek prose writers, says Holtsmark, constantly use ring composition to organize the structure of their works and simultaneously to comment on the themes. The Latin writers, knowing their Greek well and understanding quite thoroughly how Greek literature was put together, adopted this device of ring composition in their own works. At the end of Book 8 of the Aeneid, see we're back there.
All right.
For example, the goddess Venus returns to her son Aeneas with splendid weapons and a shield which the divine smith Vulcan has forged for him. This shield is a marvel to behold, for on it are represented the past, relative to Aeneas, history of Rome, as well as the future, stretching down to Virgil's own day. So then Jack gives an example of how this ring composition works. He says, over the course of 100 lines, this theme is framed by the repeated and synonymous vocabulary at start and conclusion. So we have an ABC, D, CBA structure.
Okay.
Rejoicing at honor, marvels at the shield there. Throughout the shield does he marvel, in pictures he delights. So you've got the ABC, D, CBA.
Yeah.
This is called ring composition.
All right.
Now, surprisingly, maybe for some, Burroughs had developed this technique to a very high level, talking about Tarzan swinging through the jungle.
I don't believe it.
Here we go.
All right.
So Tarzan, roaming the jungle in search of the trail of Taglot, and the she, meaning the she-ape, traveled swiftly. In a little moonlit glade ahead of him, the great ape was bending over the prostrate form of the woman Tarzan sought. Tarzan passed within 50 yards of the tragedy that was being enacted in the glade, and the opportunity was gone beyond recall.
Okay.
So that's ring composition.
All right.
That's ring composition. The scene is framed and therefore made to stand out in all its teasing eroticism by the traveling of Tarzan and by the reference to the glade itself and the little drama or tragedy in it. The brief digression that describes what Taglot is trying to do is therefore joined smoothly to the larger narrative by the epic device of ring composition, which here takes the form of both a motif, the traveling search of Tarzan, and a word, glade.
Very interesting.
Persuaded?
I need more than just an example of one. But
okay.
This is one of the things that's kind of struck me last time as well, is that so when I hear Burroughs' prose, again, granted, I have not read Tarzan of the Apes, but from what I've heard and read from Holtsmark's book, it's not great prose, right? This is not the language itself doesn't kind of blow me away.
No.
But in the greater scheme of things, and in the thesis of the book, that's neither here nor there. The fact that he's using kind of these very, I don't know if lofty is the right word, but these ancient and classical approaches to arranging his language, I find that in some ways even more fascinating that it's attached to prose that is simple, very simple.
Yes, the kind of prose that Kipling would hate.
Exactly, and apparently did.
Yeah, right. So here we go. This is from one of the novels called Tales. Tarzan swung himself into the branches of the tree. Tarzan was electrified into instant action. Like an arrow from a bow, he shot through the trees in the direction of the sound. So Holtsmark comments, sandwiched between these two framing references to action arising from arduous physical activity is the serene and restful passage which establishes Tarzan's dawning awareness of the non-physical, spiritual aspects of existence. That passage is itself framed by the phrase, swaying couch. So, what do we have? Schematically, you have A, action, followed by B, thought, couch problem, followed by B, thought, solution, couch, followed by A, action. A, B, B, A. Now, you might be thinking, come on, this is a little cutesy.
I was thinking.
Is that what you're thinking?
Oh, I'm thinking kind of one of our favorite phrases, that he's seeing something that really
not there.
Isn't there? I don't know.
I don't think so.
No?
No, I think it's there.
Okay.
It's just surprising because of the simplicity of the elements.
But I'm just thinking though, if you were just to someone told me to sit down and say, write a page and a half. It's got to be kind of a short little action story. It's got to have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that just be kind of a natural way for these kind of things to fall out?
I don't think so.
No?
Not the ABBA structure.
Okay.
Where you have action in part A and you have action in A at the end. You have a single element in the center.
Okay.
Right? So maybe I can do this in English, right? He walked into the room, sat down, read a book. The book was good. He stood up and he walked out of the room.
Okay.
That's like an ABCBA, isn't it?
It is, but isn't that...
You're not impressed.
I don't know. Okay. I'm willing to give Jack the benefit of the doubt. Okay, let's just leave it at that.
Okay, we'll leave it at that then.
Okay. All right.
So, Jeff, maybe I can convince you about these comparisons, right?
Okay.
The syncresis. So, the particular manifestation of the syncretic form in terms of father and son, this is page 52 of the book, is rather common. Greek comedy, both the older type associated with the name of Aristophanes and the newer type associated with Menander, and the earlier Roman comedians, places strong reliance on this fundamental syncresis that barely masks a sustained battle of the generations.
Okay.
Are you with me?
I'm with you.
Okay. So to begin with, one of the more specific syncreses encountered in Burroughs, we may direct attention to the type which juxtaposes Tarzan to his uncle or cousin, the putative heir and heir apparent to the distinguished title of Lord Greystoke.
Okay.
Here the ape man is seen in the jungle environment and is engaged in some barbarous activity. The others are in their urban surroundings and are busied in some civilized social diversion. A typical passage is an early one in Tarzan, the first book. Tarzan has been pursuing the native who shot his stepmother, and for the first time has seen a human being eat food that has been cooked by fire. After the man leaves the part of the slain boar that he does not eat, Tarzan partakes of the remnants. Then Holtsmark gives us a quote. So this is Tarzan himself. But be that as it may, Tarzan would not ruin good meat in any such foolish manner. So he gobbled down a great quantity of the raw flesh, burying the balance of the carcass beside the trail where he could find it upon his return. And then the Lord Greystoke wiped his greasy fingers upon his naked thighs and took up the trail of Kulonga, the son of Mbonga the king, while in far-off London another Lord Greystoke, the younger brother of the real Lord Greystoke's father, sent back his chops to the club's chef because they were underdone. And when he had finished his repast, he dropped his finger ends into a silver bowl of scented water and dried them upon a piece of snowy damask.
Well, that's nice.
That's nice. That's pretty
nice.
good.
That is a really nice juxtaposition.
Right. So he says, the antitheses leap out from the page. Mm-hmm. Do they leap at you, Winkle?
Yes. Well, I think also, but also the similarities. I think that Burroughs wants to see what, in the grand scheme of things, what's really the difference between eating the board and eating the what's the chop?
The chop.
The chop, right?
Well, the chop's cooked, right?
Yeah.
But the real civilized individual in these stories is Tarzan.
Right.
Though outwardly he's savage.
Yes.
And the savage individual is the one who's sitting in a London club, daintily putting his fingers into a silver bowl of scented water.
Yeah, this is what in my myth class I mentioned as what I take to be almost the closest thing to a skeleton key for understanding how myth or even fiction works is the tension between nature and civilization.
Yeah.
And playing with those tropes.
Right.
And so I think like the idea is that Tarzan, he looks like he's pure nature, but he's the more civilized one.
Yeah, but now you're getting into themes.
Okay, so I gotta back off,
which is good because it's technique, right?
Right.
So Holtsmark says the phrase, quote, "gobbled down a great quantity of the raw flesh," is opposed to "sent back his chops to the club's chef because they were underdone."
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And wiped his greasy fingers upon his naked thighs to dropped his finger ends into a silver bowl of scented water and dried them on a piece of snowy damask.
Right.
The underlying polarity of raw and cooked, civilized and uncivilized is quite unmistakable.
Yes.
All right. So there's good technique.
Very good technique.
Right? I would say that's excellent technique.
Agreed.
You ready to move on to animals?
Let's do it.
Okay, so I want to get your response to this, Jeff. I want to see what you think.
Let's do it.
Okay, so this is the chapter on animals, chapter 3, page 66. Of course, the naturalistic or zoological accuracy in Burroughs' depiction of ape society is of no more consequence to us than is the theological veracity of Homer's presentation of deity. Homer was no more a theologian than Burroughs was a zoologist. Both deploy their non-human actors the better to explain and comment on the human participants. So there's an interesting comparison.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, I wrestle a little bit his take on Homer.
Okay.
Just from the influence that Homer had on later Greek society, and I think how they understood the gods is unmistakable.
Yes. But we've talked about this at length, right? And this is a favorite theme of mine. I'm stealing from Werner Jaeger, right? And that is that Plato is the watershed moment in Greek theology. Mm-hmm. And Plato says, look, come on. Homer's gods are not to be taken seriously.
Right.
And all of you folks who are running around quoting Homer like he really knows something about the divine, you're just mistaken. And so could it be kind of an accident of history that people's theology derived from someone who really wasn't intending to describe the inner life of the divinities?
Yeah, I think you get into a question of intent. It's an impossible question to answer. So I think I'm with Holtsmark, maybe with the caveat that he's talking about post-Plato kind of notions of theology. But I think the influence of Homer on actual Greek theology is unmistakable.
Okay,
right? So Plato could say it's just because people are a bunch of morons.
Right.
But I think that's a little dismissive.
Okay, well, let's run it through the mill here now.
Okay.
His basic point is that if you read Tarzan and you say, you're like, what's that woman's name? Jane Goodall, is that her name? The
ape.
Gorillas in the Mist.
Yeah.
Someone like she reads Tarzan and says, oh, this is so unrealistic. The apes don't behave this way.
Right.
This isn't the structure. It's matriarchal or it's this or that.
Yeah.
Such a person would probably completely miss the point.
Gotcha. Yes.
Of why Burroughs included ape society in his story at all.
Right. In the same way that if someone is listening to a recitation of the Iliad,
right,
and harping on, well, that's not how you worship the gods, or this and that, and rather than seeing
it's inconsequential
Zeus
to the
and
story.
Aphrodite as characters in a gripping story,
right,
that is to miss the point.
Right.
Okay.
And later on, in the I think it's in the chapter on, it's either hero or themes. We're going to talk about some theological aspects of Burroughs' project, which I think are really interesting.
Okay.
And quite surprising.
All right.
But that's the first point. He says, to continue here, in this comparison of apes and men, we initially favor the apes. This impression is reinforced on many later occasions by the same typical passage in which an ape goes berserk, only to be avoided by the other members of the tribe. Without confrontation to fuel them, such sudden seizures spend themselves of their own accord. If confrontation becomes necessary, a single death may follow, but the society endures unharmed. The latter alternative takes place when Tarzan destroys his foster father, as well as when Tarzan finally kills Kerchak to become the leader of the tribe.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Not realistic to how tribal ape tribe society functions, apparently.
Yeah.
But not a valid criticism of Burroughs because he's using Holtsmark's claim is he's using ape society to comment on human relationships and character.
Yes.
Do you think Homer is doing the same thing? Maybe to revisit the question from a different angle.
Maybe not in the conscious way that Burroughs is doing it. I think the comparison holds. I think I see what Holtsmark is trying to say, but reading or hearing both stories requires some suspension of disbelief to get to really appreciate and to enjoy what the narrative is.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. Well, we'll move along then. We'll try something else.
Okay.
The obstreperous female.
Oh, this sounds interesting.
I don't know. Page 68.
Okay.
Still in the chapter on animals.
All right.
Quoth Holtsmark, the obstreperous female is a familiar figure in the Olympian world, and none is more obstreperous than Hera. True. I love the way he chooses a fairly vague word because he's wading into potentially controversial territory.
Right. So I'm better at this word than say what, shrewish?
Maybe, I don't know. I have no comment.
Okay.
And none is more obstreperous than Hera, wife of Zeus. The apes, like the deities, have on occasion to contend with a difficult she who can make life miserable for a bull. Tika, this is one of the apes, for example, is so hard to manage for the bull who abducted her that he concludes he made a mistake in taking her. Then he gives the reference. But for all the idyll and fundamentally carefree life the apes live, there is, as among the gods, continual squabbling in which lies the potential for the dissolution of the tribe. Here's another comparison, right? The gods of Homer are like the apes of Tarzan.
Okay. All right. Yeah,
You're not persuaded.
No. I actually like this a lot better.
Okay.
Yep.
Even the famous council scenes on Olympus find their counterpart among the apes. Allusion to such councils is made in Tales of Tarzan, and specific mention comes in connection with the dum-dum, the supreme ceremony of ape society.
Dum-dum is the supreme.
Dum-dum.
Okay.
D-U-M-D-U-M.
All right.
I'm sure if we asked Jane Goodall or some, I don't know if I think that's her name.
Yeah.
Or some Pithecine, or what's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know what you're looking for.
Pithecine's not the right word, but whatever word relates to apes, anthropoid, so
Yeah.
ape specialist, they'd say there is such a thing. Probably not. Anyway, indeed, in one passage, we are explicitly told that the sequestered and sheltered area in which the ceremony of the dum-dum takes place is, quote, the council chamber of the great apes.
Okay.
So what you have a scene from the Odyssey, right?
Yeah.
The apes are gathering around just like the Olympian gods.
Right, mixed with a kind of like almost a mystery element to it as well. It's not an open council; it's a secret council.
And you've got some comedy too, right? Because
it's called Dum Dum.
It's called Dum Dum, and they're apes, right?
Right.
Trying to function like a civilized society, not so different than Zeus and Hera and their squabbling, and Hephaestus, bumbling around trying to serve drinks,
right.
and Poseidon, everybody laughing at him.
Okay, yeah, I see it. I like this.
All right. So Jeff, as we go on in this chapter on animals, where do we want to pick up next?
Well, let's talk about where Holtsmark talks about Burroughs' awareness of kind of the participation in a heroic tradition.
Okay.
So
can you quote that passage?
Yeah. So Holtsmark writes, this development reveals not only Burroughs' awareness of and participation in a heroic tradition, but also his innovating departure from it. He makes the tradition work for him without being trapped in a mindless replication of it. Where the ancients wanted to believe there was something divine, or at least a possibility for it in man, Burroughs keeps reminding us of our zoological phylogeny.
Yeah.
Now, I think I lost him there. So
So he keeps reminding us of, I don't know if, is it phylogeny?
I don't know.
I think it's phylogeny.
Phylogeny.
Well, so Burroughs was a strong believer in Darwinism.
Okay.
Like, I think pretty much everyone of that early generation, all the intellectuals, they made that claim at least.
Right.
In any event, so he sees Tarzan as kind of man emerging from ape.
Yes.
And so he keeps going back to that theme. And so he doesn't see the divine in the same way that the Greeks would see human beings as descended from the gods.
I see. Okay. All right. Let me read a little bit more here.
Sure.
So it says, both the ancient writers and Burroughs are true to their respective eras. He sees theogony and catalog of women established a more or less direct provenance of men from divinity. And many other writers of antiquity believed, at least for artistic purposes, in this fact of man's origin. Like so many of his contemporaries and our own, Burroughs was deeply impressed with Darwin's theory of evolution, like you were saying.
Right.
And from that cultural vantage, he could not help seeing something of the beast in man's background. Okay, so whereas the Greeks would see, at least for the purpose of art, a kind of a reflection of the divine in human beings, in some ways Burroughs is kind of going in the opposite direction.
Yes, he's saying here is Tarzan, the man emerging from the apes.
Okay, all right.
That's the idea.
All right, okay.
Yep.
All right. Where else? Should we move on to the next chapter, or do you want to see a couple more things here?
A couple more things I think we need to see in this chapter on the apes.
Okay.
Specifically, if we go on to page 77.
All right.
About the anthropomorphism of the gods. So let me just read this portion here. The synkresis, that's the comparison of God and man, is common in Homer. The synkresis of man and animal and their respective societies is frequent in Burroughs. That's our author, of course. As Homeric, tragic, Virgilian, and other deities constantly help or hinder the humans, so the animals in Tarzan's world help friends and harm foes. A core theme of Beasts of Tarzan, that's the name of one of the novels, is clearly predicated on this classical precept of popular ethics. As the gods become a kind of magnifying glass through which the humans may be seen more accurately, the animals also permit the reader to gain insight into the psychological and spiritual workings of humans and their relationships with each other. Okay. That's a fascinating point.
That is. Yeah. So, when I teach the Iliad, we often talk about how the gods are kind of more human than humans, right? They're exaggerated notions of humanity. Is he is Holtsmark saying that Burroughs does the same thing with the apes? That in apes we see kind of also an exaggerated both the good and the bad.
Yes, and it's a kind of a commentary in the main character's interaction with them, in Tarzan's interaction with these cartoonish kinds of characters, the ape society. Mm-hmm. You see something revealed about Tarzan's character.
Okay.
In the same way that people say, are you a dog person?
Right.
Or are you a cat person?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Is there a particular personality type drawn to particular kinds of pets? I suppose so, right? How many reptiles do you have in your house?
I currently 0.
0.
Yes,
right.
We had one and we just got rid of him.
Okay, flushed it down the toilet.
No, he found a new home.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't say that on the air, right? Because that's probably a felony. I don't know.
Could be.
I'm only joking.
Right.
I'm not suggesting any cruelty to any kind of living creature.
I think when people ask a question, someone, are you a dog person or a cat person? The questioner really wants to find out, am I allowed to like you or not? Right. And they're thinking less about kind of personality types. They're just thinking about, do you agree with me on this?
But are there personality types that are reflected in things like what sort of animals you socialize with? I mean, a person who rides horses, that's a particular type.
That is a particular type.
Right.
I think broadly speaking, I think you could draw a caricature of a dog person versus a cat person.
Okay.
Yeah. Dog person might be a little bit more, energetic,
slobbery,
on the go, maybe a little bit more messy,
right?
But outdoorsy, where a cat person is more kind of happier on the couch,
fastidious.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the cat sits in their lap,
something like that.
Okay,
I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's what Burroughs is trying to kind of do here,
right?
With Tarzan's interaction with the different kinds of animals, it reveals his character.
Yeah. Okay, I like it.
So we need to touch on just a couple more items from the animals chapter.
All right, let's do it.
So let's take us to page 86, Jeff. What do we have there?
All right. Holtsmark writes, animals in Burroughs, unlike the gods in Homer, are morally quite superior to the vast majority of human beings. Okay, that's kind of what we were just saying.
Yes.
Right? So like when I teach the Iliad, I often find my students will come to the text with an idea that because they're gods,
right,
therefore they must be more moral.
Right. So they've been influenced by Plato,
yes,
by Christianity,
exactly,
by both, by another religion. I don't know
exactly, but by and large, it's actually quite the opposite, right? To be a beast, continuing here, to be a beast is not to be beastly or bestial, for beastness and bestiality or beastliness, so I like all these, right, are two different categories. Neither quality readily implies the other, although both may be found in any one individual animal. Some beasts are bestial, but so are many humans. Many beasts are also more humane than humans.
Yeah, I think that's good writing, by the way.
That is very good writing.
I like that. Yep. It's to the point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we see in the world of Homer. It's what we see in the world of Tarzan.
Right. So now I'm itching to talk about themes because I think there's lots of thematic fingerprints all over this. But should I wait?
You should wait.
Okay, I'm going to wait.
All right. So right at the bottom of that same page, just as the Greek hero may be beset on all sides by hostile divinities, as well as kindly ones. So think Odysseus, right? Poseidon is hostile to him. Athena is helpful. So Tarzan not only encounters the savage creatures who lurk in wait for him, but also has a remarkable friendship with Tantor, the elephant. And by the way, in another passage, Holtsmark points out that Tantor is from the Latin tantus, meaning really big.
Yeah.
So that's why the elephant's named that.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Continuing, its very stability and endurance is perhaps best symbolized by the great bulk of the pachyderm. He balances, as it were, the many smaller but ill-willed animals who inhabit the jungle, and he offers a solid counterweight as helper and companion of Tarzan. In his relationship to Tarzan, he offers solace and quiet friendship. He listens attentively to Tarzan's musings, for he is a very, quote, good listener. He's like the benevolent deity.
Right.
So the elephant in Tarzan is like, I don't know, Apollo or someone in myth.
Yeah. Okay. All right. This is all reminding me. A number of years ago, I wrote a chapter that ended up in a book called Modern Fantasy and Classical Tradition.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And so my chapter was on making the argument that C.S. Lewis's Voyage of the Dawn Treader,
right,
uses a lot of the same kind of themes that we see in Apuleius' Metamorphoses.
Absolutely.
Right? And when I wrote that chapter, one of the things that I set out to do, and I think I did it, but just barely, was I had to show, I had to prove that Lewis, one, knew Apuleius, had read that, and that the story was meaningful to him in some kind of way. And there's enough in his letters that survives that suggests just that. And so then I went from there and kind of to make the comparison. And then when I sent it off, you send these things off to anonymous readers, right? And there was 2 readers. One reader came back, was very enthusiastic. He says, "Yes, this is great. Let's publish it." And the second reader said, "I'm okay with publishing it, but," he says, "it could be that Lewis felt some kind of apulian influence." And I'll never forget the phrase it says, "or it could just be the way these stories are told." And so he was hesitant to make any kind of concrete connection, just because he kind of felt like I had my idea, and I was cherry picking things to fit.
Okay, right? But doesn't the first guy win, the first reviewer, obviously, because the story of Cupid and Psyche is in Apuleius, isn't it? Yeah, and that's the basis of Lewis's novel, Till We Have Faces.
Right. And
isn't that a slam dunk?
Well, I used that, right?
Okay.
But I mean, the comparisons I was making with the Dawn Treader all had to do with Appius' Metamorphoses and not Cupid and Psyche. So I needed to establish a link there as well. And I remember at a conference talking to one of the Bens, was the editors there. I met him and talking to him about this, and he told me, if you hadn't established that very concrete link between Apuleius and C.S. Lewis, I wouldn't have accepted your chapter.
Okay.
And so I thought,
so you did it. I mean,
I did it, but it reminds me of kind of right where we are here.
Okay.
So I think establishing Burroughs' connection to the classics it's not the be all end all, but I think it's very important for this book. But when I read about talking about the apes as the gods, and this is akin to that,
the Council of the Dum-Dum,
right? My mind has wandered. Is it okay? That's really an interesting parallel, but are we creating something out of thin air, and that you could find a zillion other stories and say, oh, I can make this fit.
Even though he had a professed and abiding interest in classical myth?
That helps the argument.
And even though he studied Latin for 8 years, and he knew Caesar well, and he had read some Virgil and some Greek in translation?
I'm not saying that's immaterial, but I'm wondering, could you take Kipling's Jungle Book and say these exact same things?
Well, maybe. I don't know. Yeah. It's been a while since I've read that work.
Right. I just pulled it up because Kipling seems to have a problem with Tarzan.
Yeah. Well, later he's going to mention the story of Romulus and Remus, and you're going to see a closer connection.
Excellent.
Now, maybe that doesn't prove that Tontor, is a benevolent deity in Tarzan's life, the elephant. But I think it's highly suggestive.
Okay, I agree with that, yes.
Just as a digression.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with today's episode. You mentioned the Dawn Treader.
Yeah.
I was once talking to some small child, I don't remember who, delightful child, precocious child, not mine. And the child told me that they were reading The Voyage of Don Cheadle. The actor,
I know Don Cheadle.
I could not figure out what the child was telling me. The Voyage of Don Cheadle. I never read that one.
He went on a cruise.
Yeah, I don't know what it... I wasn't listening carefully. The child had a little trouble pronouncing it, but yeah.
That's hilarious.
Isn't that funny?
I'd read The Voyage of Don Cheadle. He's an excellent actor.
There you go. Right. And speaking of Don Cheadle, it's time for the ads.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by Hackett Publishing for the last 52 years now, and I remember it because Hackett is as old as I am.
No way.
Yeah, that old. With their offices in Indianapolis and Cambridge, Massachusetts, they have been bringing the classics to a popular audience in affordable and attractive and accessible ways. And I've talked at length at all the books that I have on my shelf that we've used for this podcast, that I use in my classroom. I love Hackett.
Yeah, let me read you some of the things they offer here.
Okay.
These are the categories, just the categories. Asian studies, classical studies, the Lingua Latina per se Illustrata series, history, Latin American studies, literature, modern languages, philosophy, and it goes on and on.
Yeah, you're gonna find what you're looking for, and you'll be astounded at how affordable these things are.
Yeah.
Right? So one of the things my students bemoan is the cost of textbooks.
Oh yeah.
But when I order Stanley Lombardo's Odyssey from my myth class, or the translation of the Bacchae, they are astoundingly affordable.
That's right.
Yep.
Very attainable. So also the classical languages offerings. I'm looking at the website here. A Hackett Test Prep Manual for use with AP Latin, written by a guy named Ed De Horatius.
perfect.
That's good, isn't it?
That's not bad.
He's got Horatius in his last name.
Yes.
Or how about A Horace Reader by Henry V. Bender, A Student Handbook of Greek and English Grammar, Part 2 of Latin Grammar, Aeneid Book 1. You name it, they got it.
So, listener, if you're interested in any of this, do yourself a favor. Go to hackettpublishing.com, HACKETT publishing.com. Find what you're looking for. Put it in your little digital satchel.
Thingy-madoo.
Yep. And what's our coupon code?
It is AN, as in ad nauseum, and then the current year, which is MMXXIII. Is that right?
No.
Oh, sorry. I was given the Roman numerals.
Right. I can understand why you would do that. It's actually much simpler.
Okay.
AN2023.
And that will get them what?
That will get them 20% off their entire order and
free shipping.
Check it out.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is also brought to you by Ratio Coffee, Portland, Oregon. When I say the words Portland, Oregon, what do you think?
I think hippies.
No. Ratio Coffee.
Oh, that's right. Exactly. That's what I meant to say.
You think of Mark Helweg, the entrepreneur, who wanted to bring good coffee instead of the typical mass produced stuff that you get.
Right.
And how did he achieve that?
Well, I mean, he did some rigorous study and comparison, and
right.
And I think there's actual science behind this. Yes,
really,
exactly. And he produced these incredible machines, the Ratio 6 and the Ratio 8.
And you're a user of both.
I had the 6 for a while. Now I've kind of stepped up to the 8.
Graduated.
But they both produce just the perfect cup of coffee.
Yeah.
There's no reason to go down to the bagel barn and beanery.
And brewery something, right?
No. You can do it right in your kitchen.
Are we going to trot out all the tired tropes and crazy taglines and slogans we've used about the Kindle brick and the scorch pad, and then the other one that we won't mention, and the metallic veins and the Fibonacci head and the plutonium holding carafe? Are we going to do all of that?
All these things that we're not going to mention.
Right. And the brackish tang. We can't say that. People are so tired of that.
No, so tired. No, let's not mention all those things you just mentioned.
Yes.
All
and
right.
the bloom stage.
Oh yeah. Exactly.
And then the brew stage.
Right.
Like the Hitchcock movie, right?
Oh, the brew.
No, you're messing it up.
The bloom with a brew.
It's a bloom with a brew.
That's right, exactly. No, we're not going to mention any of that stuff, right?
But let's say that there's someone out there who's enjoying the podcast, hard to believe, and wants to get better coffee, up their coffee game.
Yeah.
What should they do?
They should go to ratiocoffee.com.
Okay.
RATIO coffee.com.
You think they can spell coffee?
I think they can spell coffee.
Okay.
That's right. I have faith in them.
We'll let it go.
And if they want to get one of these wonderful machines, the 6 or the 8, or check out all the other kind of accessories and things that Ratio has to offer.
Now, wait a minute, Jeff. I got to interrupt. Yep. Maybe someone will go there and they'll say, "Are you crazy? You want me to pay that much for a coffee machine?"
Yeah, it's
I can get a $20 Dack and Blecker or a Senior Coffee down at Quickie Mart or something like that.
Yeah, you could do that.
Okay, but why shouldn't they?
Well, because this is a machine, unlike the Senior Cafe.
Right.
It's not gonna crap out on you in
20 minutes.
In 7 weeks, I was gonna say, but
okay.
And it just becomes another kind of hunk of junk, haunting the corner of your garage.
Yes.
These things are something you can pass down to your children.
I would say though that those machines, the ones we were denigrating, they're very good at imparting a plastic taste to your coffee.
That is true.
They're very good at that.
Exactly. Sometimes you just want a little plastic in the morning. Right.
Can really taste the petroleum.
Right.
So you're saying the Ratio 8 and 6, they don't do that, and although they're more they're less attainable maybe than some of the cheapos.
Yep.
You can leave it to your kids in the will.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of those cases where you get what you pay for.
Okay.
And these are wonderful machines. It's an investment. If you're into coffee, this is the obvious next step.
No looking back.
Nope.
And when you take it out of the box, you'll say what your kids said when you took it out of the box, right?
Which was what?
It looks like the Millennium Falcon.
That's right. That's right. Exactly right.
Incredible.
It's another trope we're not going to mention. Not going to mention it. Right.
So go to ratiocoffee.com and here is their coupon code.
ANCOB as in beta.
Okay.
8.
But you really had to think hard about that one.
There's so many other kind of coffee.
B as in beta.
B as in beans.
Okay.
Brew.
ANCOB 8.
And what will that get them, Dave?
That will get them 15% off. Check it out.
All right, Dave, we're going to get into chapter 4, which is entitled Hero.
Hero.
And where should we begin with this?
Well, I think we want to begin right on the second page of the chapter.
Okay.
In which Holtsmark talks about a paradigm of the heroic type.
Okay.
So let me quote here. In the following analysis of Tarzan's congruence with the paradigm of the heroic type, no suggestion is made that Burroughs sat down and drew up a similar pattern. It would not be surprising, however, if he had done just that, for we know that from his earliest years he was fascinated by classical myth and culture. A letter dated 13 February 1887 from his older brother George, written to Burroughs in reply to one from him, underscores the point. Burroughs himself specifically credited his fascination with the ancient Roman legend about the suckling of Romulus and Remus by a she-wolf for the origin of Tarzan, himself suckled by a she-ape.
All right, now there we go.
There's your smoking gun.
There's your smoking gun.
Your silver bullet.
All right, I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah.
You're there with it?
I am.
Okay.
Yep.
You want to read on from that part? Because I think the next paragraph is equally illustrative.
Yes. The profusion of heroic motifs and the displacements they have undergone in Burroughs' hero are indicative of a composite and eclectically conceived protagonist. He may well be Romulus, or Remus, but he is also Hercules, Achilles, Odysseus, Perseus, Telemachus, Orestes, and countless other specific heroes. It is not strange that Burroughs, who had read widely in the classics and who, by his own admission, was inordinately fond of classical mythology, should have come up with a hero as classical, even in smaller details, as Tarzan. Consciously or not, Burroughs created his Tarzan in the classical mold.
So now you're convinced, right?
I am.
Okay.
I am, exactly. I think this is very interesting. That as I was reading that long list of heroes there, I was starting to get a little bit nervous.
Okay.
Because he's kind of going that, everything can mean anything and anything can mean everything. Right? You can see whatever hero you want mirrored in Tarzan. But I think we've established the background, his interest, the specific fascination with Romulus and Remus, and the animal-human connection.
Right.
All right, we're good to go.
I think also this explains the extraordinary popularity of the story. And maybe why other people resented Burroughs' success, right? He's a hack who's just repeating old motifs,
right?
Cliched formulae, right?
Right.
But that's what people want.
Yes, exactly, right.
Right.
It's George Lucas and Star Wars.
Exactly.
Right.
With the exception of, I guess, what is actually the first one that came out fourth.
Yes.
The one with Jar Jar Binks. What was that called?
The Phantom Menace.
The Phantom Plot.
Number one. Yeah.
Yeah. Oof.
Right.
But go ahead.
But I remember when, I was very young when Star Wars came out.
Right.
I'm old enough to have seen it as a kid.
1978, I think.
77 was A New Hope. But in looking at kind of Lucas's mythic interests, Star Wars was not critically well received.
No.
It was like who are these actors?
It's no Space Odyssey, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which is unwatchable.
It's funny you say that. I tried to watch it because everybody keeps telling me what a great movie it is.
It's not.
I can't get past 10 minutes.
No, it's so excruciatingly slow.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where everybody likes it because they've been told they have to like it.
It's like watching golf.
Right.
Oops.
But I mean, Chris, Mark Hamill can't act his way out of a Ziploc baggie, which is there's some truth to that,
right?
And just kind of like the wooden dialogue,
right?
Even Alec Guinness, Sir Alec Guinness,
right?
He was embarrassed
to be in it.
Be in it, excited.
It's the only thing he's known for now, though, right?
It was exactly right.
Obi-Wan.
And he lamented that to the end of his days.
Right.
But then, of course, it explodes in popularity. It makes zillions of dollars, right? And I think a lot of people just resented that. And then when it came out that Lucas was, had patterned his story after Joseph Campbell's Stages of the Hero's Journey.
Right? Back to our episode, The Young and the Restless.
Exactly. A lot of people said, well, look what he's doing. He's just trotting out the old cliches.
So what?
Right? Those cliches are cliches for a reason because they work.
Have you ever seen a Three Stooges movie?
I have seen a Three Stooges movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the most delightful moment in one of those movies? It's when Mo hits one of the other guys.
Of course.
And you know it's coming.
Exactly right.
And it's funny 1,000 times.
Right, exactly right. Right.
And maybe I've, revealed here my own brutality to enjoy watching one guy hit another guy, with between the eyes. But then there's the stooge block sometimes.
Exactly right.
Right.
To
Curly.
the eye poke, right?
Right. Curly's able to avoid it. And it's obviously stupid and formulaic, but in some ways so satisfying.
So satisfying. When he takes the large plumbing wrench to Larry's nose. Exactly. I can't get enough of that.
We all see it coming.
Right. So I should say, I thought one thing was interesting is that the kind of the hero cycle that he uses is not Campbell's.
It's Raglan.
It's Raglan's, which I was not aware of.
No, I wasn't either. So you learned something there.
I did learn something.
So did I.
So he wrote this in, what was this, like
1981.
All right. So Campbell was known.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And he was kind of the name is, but he chose Raglan.
He chose Raglan.
Well,
yep.
I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. So the top of page 97 here. This analysis takes us through category 15. We're not going to mention all of them in Raglan's list, And all but number 3, the father and mother are close relatives, and number 12, marriage to a princess, are present. Beyond reasonable question, Tarzan does fit the heroic pattern as outlined by Raglan, a pattern that could be duplicated from other sources without substantive changes in the gross outlines. In the final category, 16 through 22, however, the fit is perhaps more equivocal. So this goes against your claim, Winkle, that he's just seeing stuff that's not there, right?
Well,
Holtsmark's he's being very careful here. Tarzan does not die in the first 6 books, or later for that matter, nor does he, as a result, become the object of formal cult worship as a hero. These are Raglan elements. Burroughs has nevertheless made certain accommodations in an ideal pattern of the heroic vita that permit us to discern some of these categories in Tarzan's biography, albeit in faded or displaced configurations.
No, that's very good. I mean, I would say that, and also to the audience, if you want to, you've tracked down a copy of this book, and in an appendix, he does lay out Raglan's the steps.
Yes.
So you can check it out for yourself. But one of the critiques I know that the enduring critiques of Campbell is that he has these specific stages of the hero's journey. The criticism is that, well, they're still all vague enough that you can kind of make anything fit.
Right.
And I wonder if we could say the same thing about Raglan's steps here. Holtsmark says, look, almost all these stages, except for 2 or 3, are there.
Right.
But are the stages themselves generic enough that you could kind of make any square peg fit around?
All right. So draw the conclusion for me here.
All right. Well, I'm tempering kind of the surety of the claim with an idea that, well, okay, but just because it seems to match Raglan's isn't evidence that of kind of direct classical influence.
Okay.
I think there are better arguments than this one.
Right.
I think the thing we just said about his fascination with Romulus and Remus,
right,
and the man-animal thing. Okay, now that's a hook we can hang something on.
Okay.
Yeah.
He does have a catabasis of sorts.
Of course.
Right? In the Jewels of Tarzan, right? He has a catabasis. He goes to Opar, the lost civilization in the midst of Africa, which traces its ancestry back to the legendary Atlantis. And it is in Opar that Tarzan is temporarily killed, quote unquote. Right? He's trapped way down underneath the surface, and he comes back out.
Yeah.
So there's your catabasis, right?
Catabasis, right? Yeah. I mean, that's what heroes do. Right?
Okay.
All right. That's what almost every hero does.
Right. And we are here recording, right, in the basement, the bunker. We had to go down the stairs.
We do a catabasis every time we do
That's
this.
Correct. That's why we're heroes.
Right. That's right. Right. Exactly.
Well, let's go on a little bit further and let's add a little bit more proof, right? Can you read starting on page 100 right at the top?
Yes.
Please.
Burroughs himself was willing enough to concede that such a story might have been written 15 years ago or 1,500 years ago. There is nothing new in the idea, nor have I claimed there was anything new in it. It has been used repeatedly from the time of Romulus and Remus, and probably long before. Tarzan, this is Holtsmark now. Tarzan must be understood as a completely and thoroughly traditional hero with an inalienable place in the upper branches of that literary tree whose roots are deeply embedded in the still fertile soil of the Greek and Roman classics.
Isn't that nice? That's a good turn of phrase, isn't it?
It is.
Especially since Tarzan himself spends so much time in the tops of trees.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And running around in that fertile soil.
That's correct. So there's a double entendre there.
Right.
So I think it's right. This explains both the popularity of the story, why it receives so much hate from the critics, and its origin. Right?
Yeah.
It's Romulus and Remus.
One of the things I thought was interesting in this chapter is that Holtsmark spends probably in terms of making a direct comparison with a classical hero, he seems to kind of land on Odysseus as being the best kind of corollary to Tarzan, which to my mind is, I mean, there's nothing kind of strikingly incorrect or strange about these claims, but I thought Hercules
would be more common.
Yes, in terms of like a hero that is savage, but kind of wants to be civilized.
But he's fairly antisocial. He's a loner. And I suppose you might say in some sense that's Tarzan also, because he's alone in the jungle. But he is, what's the word I'm looking for? Initiated and integrated into the ape society. He gets to attend the dum-dum, for example.
Right. He does get, right. Yeah, I just...
And Hercules has no wit.
Well, neither does Tarzan.
Oh, yes.
There's no metis about him.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, convince me.
Well, you have adopted the 1950s screen adaptations where he speaks broken English.
Okay, all right.
And Holtsmark talks about how this was entirely wrong from the perspective of Burroughs.
Okay.
His character had taught himself how to read and spoke perfect English the first time he encountered a white man or any, English speaker in the part of Africa where he lived.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fair enough. I just think the scenes where Tarzan's in Wisconsin,
right,
or he's in kind of upper crust London society. I thought that speaks to me kind of the Hercules as kind of a man without a home, right? Hercules doesn't fully belong in the city. He doesn't fully belong out in nature.
Okay.
And that's kind of
so you liken him to Hercules?
Hercules or like a Batman.
Okay.
In the Batman.
I think it's Odysseus.
Really?
Yep. Let me read it a little bit here.
All
So,
right.
among the many epithets applied to Tarzan that recur with great frequency are lithe, bronzed, smooth, brown, and muscular. Tarzan is not, however, a muscle man. Indeed, Burroughs was not happy with the first movie Tarzan, a guy named Elmo Lincoln, who played in Tarzan of the Apes because he was, quote, far from my conception of the character. Tarzan was not beefy, but was light and graceful and well-muscled. Then he must be the epitome of grace. My conception of him is a man a little over 6 feet tall and built more like a panther than an elephant, end quote. And so we find liberal use of such adjectives as supple and graceful. Burroughs admitted that he was rather prone to use superlatives. I think that makes it classical just there. Translating something from the classical era or from the imitators in the 16th century, their prose is just littered with superlatives. I mean, there's one after another. It's the mostest superlatives I've ever seen.
Okay.
You can't do anything with them because English style isn't like that.
Right. Yeah.
But they love it, right? And so, I mean, he says he does not hesitate, in spite of his formulations regarding the ideal Tarzan, to call him giant, as well as tall, big, huge, and great. The first impression that Tarzan gives is of a superb physique.
Okay.
So not so much Hercules, I'm saying.
I see a lot of Hercules in there. Big, huge, great. Does that describe Odysseus?
Well,
swarthy, bow-legged, short.
Okay,
Right?
but light, graceful, well-muscled, the epitome of grace.
Right.
Not bulking. Can you read the little Tarzan quote in the middle of the page?
Sure. Here we go. His straight and perfect figure, muscled as the best of the ancient Roman gladiators must have been muscled. Heracles. And yet with the soft, sinuous curves of a Greek god.
Not Hercules.
Told at a glance the wondrous combination of enormous strength with suppleness and speed.
Yeah. Now, Jack's comment right after this
Right.
is very much on point.
Okay. Here one notes the merging, even if stereotyped, of the two cultures of Burroughs' classical hero, the might of Rome and the beauty of Greece.
Right. And Holtsmark admits it's stereotypical. But so what? When you think of Greece, what do you think? I don't think of power. I think of grace and beauty. And when I think of Rome, I think of a bulldozer.
Right. So Tarzan contains
Both of those
these things.
qualities.
Right. Yeah. I think that's probably one of the things that that just personally that I don't particularly care about Tarzan. He's the way that Burroughs presents him is that he's trying to make him every hero.
Okay.
I'd rather he land on a particular square.
But you're modern. Ooh.
Burroughs isn't modern?
I've been waiting 118 episodes to say that.
I tend to not like heroes that are trying to be all things to all people.
Fair enough.
Right. Spread too thin.
Okay.
Right.
But if you had lived at the time of Burroughs, would you be like one of those critics? This is junk.
Probably.
Yeah.
All right, Dave, I think I've found proof for my thesis here.
Okay.
Zip ahead to page 109.
All right. We're still in the chapter on the hero.
Yes, in the first full paragraph there. Do you have that or do you want me to read
No,
that?
go ahead.
Okay. So Holtsmark writes, part of Tarzan's overwhelming appeal as a protagonist is precisely his boundless potential to become anything he wants to be. All right?
Okay.
He combines the best of the man who is physically active and intellectually inquisitive.
That's not Hercules.
True.
Okay.
And both possibilities are part of his British aristocratic roots. Tarzan is able to bridge the two worlds of knowledge and action, for in understanding the one in terms of the other, he has unified these two primary areas of human experience, word and deed, thought and action, mind and body.
Now, of whom does that remind you? Come on.
All right, okay, Odysseus.
There we go.
All right, Odysseus, but
Palutrapos, versatile, a man of many turns.
But Odysseus is also deeply flawed. All right, as Tarzan Is he's just kind of, he can just morph into kind of whatever hero he wants to be given the moment?
He's not deeply flawed. I don't think.
Okay.
He does have some moments of rage and so forth. We haven't talked about those, but Holtsmark comments on them.
Okay.
But he's not the kind of person that would kill Dolan, coming out of Troy.
Right, exactly, right. So, and, right. I think that Tarzan is, I think one question we haven't really talked about is like, who are these novels for? Right?
Anybody who wants to read them.
Well,
who likes a rip-roaring good story told with classical panache and style.
Well, my sense is that these books are, the target audience would be adolescent boys. All right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But so I think to expect kind of deeper, existential themes in a book that is for kids would be wrong, right?
You're saying children aren't capable of deeper themes?
I'm not saying
take away the pejorative adjective existential and let's just talk about deeper themes.
I think children can handle deeper themes, but in the same way that I wouldn't shove a tome of Dostoevsky in my teenager's hands and say, "Here, appreciate this."
Okay, but why not?
Because I think at age 12, you're not going to get crime and punishment.
Okay,
right,
all right.
So I'm saying here that considering who the target audience is, presumably to critique Tarzan for being a hero that's all things to all people and finding something kind of thin and shallow, that is not a fair criticism. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
All right.
Well, let's skip ahead to page 112.
Okay.
Here's a deeper theme for you.
All right.
Quote, Tarzan cannot see God, but he adopts the firm conviction that, quote, everything that was good came from God. His own hesitation in slaying the witch doctor, Tika's selfless protection, that's one of the apes, of her infant, his own help in rescuing it, and the beauty of nature. To his own immediate satisfaction, he then accounts for the creation of all other things in the jungle, including beautiful Shita, noble Numa, and lovely Bara. Like the biblical prophets, he must ask himself about the source of evil, or much as the writers of Genesis did some 3 millennia ago, about where the snake in the Garden of Eden came from. He asks the question, who made Hista, the snake?
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah, Tarzan is ruminating on some deeper themes.
Sure.
I suppose it's easy for critics to tear this apart as a kind of juvenile rumination.
Right.
But I think it makes the character, more than unidimensional.
Right. Agreed.
Could you read that next part there?
Sure.
Please.
The heroic mentality of the classical protagonist is essentially in a state of siege, for it feels threatened by the world at the same time that it must have the world in order to recognize its worth. Burroughs develops this aspect of the heroic personality that involves apartness, separateness, and difference in his portrayal of Tarzan. For Tarzan's general attitudes about other human beings are not, on the whole, favorable, and he sees himself as somehow apart. Even in relationship to the apes, his own people, he is not always totally comfortable once he reaches thinking age. Okay, so there I see, there's a lot of Hercules there.
Yeah,
someone who he doesn't belong in either world. Right. It reminds me of my film class. We talk about the genre of the Western as kind of a purely American mythos, and one of the archetypal characters is the gunslinger.
Yep.
And the paradox of the gunslinger is that the gunslinger doesn't belong anywhere. All right. So the gunslinger has to go into the lawless territory, use violence to bring law and order about. But once law and order have been settled, the gunslinger doesn't belong there anymore. And so the gunslinger
has to leave.
It's like, every Clint Eastwood character that any Western, he has to leave. He's always kind of in between. Right. And that's what always struck me as like Hercules represents the paradox of the gunslinger. He brings, with his labors, he kind of he tames the monster in the neighborhood. Right. But he's always moving on. Tarzan here, as Holtsmark describes him, is that he doesn't fully belong in the jungle. He doesn't fully belong in London. Okay. And so that he's torn between these things.
Yet he's the everyman. Right.
Okay. But I think that's true of a lot of heroes, a lot of anti-heroes. I think one of the things we identify with them is a lot of people feel like that, right? Mm-hmm. We feel displaced. That the places that we call home don't always feel like home.
That's good. Well put.
All right.
One thing I've noticed is that about myself and about others is we want to be both totally normal and totally different at different times.
Yes.
Right? We want to be considered not like anybody else. I am unique. I'm sui generis. But other times we take the opposite approach. I'm just like everybody else.
Right.
And I don't think those two things are obviously, I think that they're obviously deeply inconsistent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's
irreconcilable.
Exactly. No, but I think that's the experience of everyone, right?
Right.
And where does the self lie?
So then no one is unique.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So,
I say, go ahead.
No, I've everything I've said, I've been trying to avoid the L word.
Oh,
right?
Thank you so much.
Right.
Liminal. Right. There, I'll say it.
Right. But Tarzan is a kind of a classical liminal figure. He doesn't really belong anywhere. Right.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think we should push on to chapter 5 and themes.
Yes.
And bring this ship into port.
Let's do it.
So one of the themes of the Tarzan stories is love.
Of course.
Is there anybody for Tarzan?
Jane.
Right? Well, but she doesn't appear immediately.
Oh, really?
Right? And she can't be fitted neatly into his world.
That's right.
Because she wasn't suckled by an ape and raised in his world. So there are a number of discontinuities.
These crazy kids have so many things against them. Yeah. All right.
So in this particular novel called The Return of Tarzan, you didn't know he'd left, but this is page 136.
He's coming back.
Okay. In Return, La, this is a woman that loves him, La is twice disappointed in her desire to keep Tarzan with her. The time separating this incident from their next meeting in Jewels of Tarzan must be at least 20 years, for in the interim, Tarzan has married and his son Jack has grown up and married.
Oh my.
Presumably at the same age as his father. A little bit of Odysseus and Telemachus there, huh?
Okay.
Nonetheless, both Tarzan and La, in their early 40s at this time, are as desirable as ever.
Of course.
Just like Odysseus, right? He doesn't seem to have aged. And we learn that for these 20 years, La has gone against the dictates of her religion and her assigned role in her society, that she marry one of the ugly Oparian men, by waiting for Tarzan's return. La's flouting of the norms of her world is Ovidian in its grotesqueness. And in her own way, she is the literary descendant of Ovid's foolish Thisbe, insane Medea, vacillating Mira, and raging Ariadne, to mention a few. La's love is an obsession, an unhealthy thing in the best tradition of the great classical passions, and she offers Tarzan heaven and earth if he will but stay.
Okay.
Can you carry on there to get to the end?
Sure. After these impassioned protestations of her enduring and eternal love, one may well imagine how easily love is transformed into hate, especially in the view of Tarzan's reply to her. Quote, "The ape man pushed the kneeling woman aside. Tarzan does not desire you," he said simply. That's it.
Ouch.
This erotic anti-hero is reminiscent of all those heroic protagonists who shunned their insanely passionate women in Ovid and earlier Hellenistic poets such as Theocritus and Apollonius. And La's outraged reaction is true to Ovidian form. Even Burroughs' extravagant prose to describe her wrath recalls the stylistic preciosity in which Ovid's Latin wraps the diatribes of his abandoned heroines.
Are you a little more convinced now?
Yeah, I am. I like this point a lot.
Okay.
Right? And that list of Thisbe, Medea, Mira, and Ariadne. Okay.
Right.
All right. And
Those tragic heroines, right?
Tarzan does not want you.
Tarzan does not want you. Right. What else does he have to say, frankly? I mean, that's just,
Exactly. Right.
That's it.
Speaks of, he always speaks of himself in the third person.
I don't know. Like Bob Dole?
Bob Dole. That's right. All right, Dave. We should tell the audience. I mean, there's a ton of stuff that we're skipping over.
Of course.
For the sake of time, we have to plow through.
No choice.
So let's get to the conclusion.
Okay.
And let's go to the section of Holtsmark's book that is titled Conclusion.
Isn't that apt?
It is.
Okay.
Read a bit of that, would you?
All right. I'm going to read the final paragraph.
All right.
And this book is out of print. Any of you are interested in Tarzaniana or classics? I encourage you to find it. But here we go. Burroughs' language is strongly reminiscent of the language and style of Greek and Latin. In his much maligned repetition of language, motifs, and themes, we see a clear analog to the organic wholeness of Homeric epic, and his alleged stylistic defectiveness, in fact, constitutes the very bedrock on which his heroic fantasy is constructed. The techniques and materials on which he constantly relies have been seen to derive largely from the antecedents of classical prototypes: the parallel plot, thematic multiplication, ring composition, heroic pattern, polarity, mythos, synkresis, chiasmus, divine machinery, and a host of others. Burroughs, like all good traditionalists, was able to use his antecedents without mindless imitation. He remained firmly rooted in a past tradition and at the same time was an inventive innovator on its patterns. Whatever its sources in shared conventions of form or collective memory of theme, the power that makes us respond to the wandering of Odysseus is also at work in Burroughs' Tarzan, and the two great popular heroes speak openly to our most cherished fantasies.
Very eloquent.
Well done.
Well done.
But what do you think of the claims?
I mean, overall, I am convinced.
Okay.
Right? I think throughout I was pushing back.
You can quibble around the corners.
Exactly. You're pushing back in some ways just to play devil's advocate a little bit. I mean, that idea that, am I seeing something specific, or is this is just kind of generic archetypes that are everywhere? That bothers me. But, but the way he ties it up there, right on.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's something really valuable in the effort, frankly.
Yeah.
Because popular literature has, by definition, enormous appeal.
Yes.
Where does it come from?
Right.
I would expect it to have something in common with a work like Homer.
Exactly.
Which I'm not saying it's equal to it, obviously.
Right.
But something in common because it has survived so long.
Yeah. And I love stuff that can connect these dots over the centuries.
Yeah.
I think that's brilliant.
Wouldn't it be surprising if the Tarzan novels are being read 500-600 years from now, if the world lasts that long?
Right.
I don't think anybody would pick them as 20th century. You know, it's all T.S. Eliot and things like that. And I'm not putting them down, but wouldn't it be surprising?
It would. It really, really would. Yeah.
But who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Who knows?
Yep. Well, we have to wrap things up.
We got to get out of here. Before we do that, Dave, want to tell us a little bit about the Moss Method and LLPSI?
Yeah, we have a huge sale coming up.
Huge.
Actually, May 1st, May 2nd, and May 3rd of next week.
All right.
This episode will be out shortly. I have never offered 20% off these programs, but I'm offering 20% off for the first time.
3 days only.
That's right. May 1, May 2, May 3. Go to mossmethod.com and latinperdiem.com. And you can find my Greek and Latin courses respectively. They are self-paced, expert, and accessible. They take you from
neophyte to erudite.
That's correct. You get to watch videos and interact with me both on the screen and in person during our office hours. As I've said many times, there may be a better program out there. I'm not really qualified to judge, but I really honestly don't think there is a better value in terms of the combination of expertise and comprehensiveness and cost.
Excellent. And if they go to mossmethod.com and latinperdiem.com, there's a lot of free stuff they can check out.
Almost 2,000 instructional videos I have on my YouTube channel.
Fantastic.
Analyzing Greek and Latin for free.
Fantastic.
We have to thank some people.
Yes.
And it's a pleasure to do so.
Absolutely. Mishka, our wonderful engineer, who puts this all together in record time.
Yep.
And makes it all sound seamless.
Thank you so much.
Who are these musicians?
We didn't have Scott Van Zen on this one.
No, but let's thank him anyway.
Oh, yeah. He's an incredible guitarist.
Yep.
Provided so much excellent music for us. And our friend Ken Tamplin is going to be singing a cover song for the outro music, a little bit of a surprise coming up in just a few moments.
Excellent.
And provides the bumper music for the ads.
All right. And if you want to drop us a note, if you want a shout out, you got some ideas, you got a complaint, you got a praise, you can write to Dave at dave@adnauseam.com. Don't forget that V.
Or Jeff at adnauseam.com. Don't forget the V in nauseam.
Go to adnauseam.com. Again, don't forget the V. Check out our merch with Lurch section. Get yourself a Lurch with merch.
It's the other way around.
Lurch with merch. And pick yourself up a nice T-shirt and check out our other things on offer there.
That's correct. So, Jeff, what are we doing next week?
I think we're gonna start these last two episodes of the Aeneid. Let's wrap that up.
Yep. Book 12, episodes 1 and 2 of the Aeneid, and then we will be done. Put that thing to rest.
Fantastic. All right, and Dave, I believe you have our gustatory parting shot.
I do. It's from someone named Travis Jeremiah Donkey, and I think it's pronounced correctly. The name of the work is Write Like No One Is Reading. I like it already. He says, quote, "One time I went to a restaurant and I asked the waiter for some food for thought. He left, came back, and tried shoving a sirloin in my ear."
Nice. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.